Uttarakhand, the symbol of faith, spirituality, and excitement, along with the natural grandeur it possesses. In this beauteous path of nature and in the magnificence of its snow-capped mountains and streams, the folk culture of the place commingles with its flow of faith. Its identity comes from the Himalayas and the Ganga flowing through it. While the journey to Uttarakhand is renowned for holy pilgrimage on one hand, it caters to the modernization of tourism on the other two. It's a place which not only makes experience spiritual peace, but also helps in the realization of such a positive energy which provides renewed vigor towards life. That's the reason Uttarakhand has been a cause of endearment for sages, thinkers, seekers, and ascetics, along with the pilgrims and tourists for centuries. This journey through nature encompasses the home to many holy places, rivers, waterfalls, lakes, valleys, and meadows, and rare fauna, along with its mountains and the two rivers, the Ganga and the Yamuna. The incessancy of faith, spirituality, and excitement of its Himalayan journey has continuously kept attracting people. In the same way, Swami Vivekananda too got attracted towards Uttarakhand at the end of 19th century and kept visiting this place for the purpose of meditation and excursion for a span of almost 12 years. Swamiji experienced a special kind of feeling in the looming faith, spirituality, and beauty of Uttarakhand. In order to experience the same feeling, he visited this place not only once but 5 times. He came here for the first time in 1888 and then revisited in 1890, 1897, 1898, and 1900 to 1901. These travels have been put forth in the form of Swami Vivekananda Tourist Circuit by the Uttarakhand state government. Let's take a look at the chief spots of these travels at a glance. This map shows the Kumaon part of Uttarakhand. For our own convenience, we can break it into 2 parts. One of them moves through Nainital, Almora, and Bageshwar, while the other towards Lohaghat of Champawat district. Vivekananda at first went to Katgodam railway station and from there on to Nainital, to Kakri Ghat, to Almora, to Kasardevi, and lastly to Devaldhar. The other route that he took passes through Dhari, Paharpani, Mornola, and Dhunaghat to reach the Advaita Ashram, Mayavati of Lohaghat. Come, join us in following the steps of Swamiji in Devbhoomi, Uttarakhand. After the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna in 1886, his chief disciples rented a dilapidated house in Boranagur and started living the ascetic life dedicated to the ideals of their master. Soon the young monks scattered in all directions, eager to practice sadhana in some remote and lonely spot, or to go on pilgrimages to the holy places. Like the others, Narendra, as he was then known, also longed to become a wanderer, to seek out some hidden retreat in the Himalayas where he could plunge into deep meditation. This led him to his first attempt to North India in 1887. During the end of 1887, Swamiji made his journey till Varanasi. He stayed there for some days and then had to come back to Calcutta. He attempted for the northern India the second time in 1888, and this time he intended to proceed to Badrinath. Travelling from Calcutta to Varanasi to Ayodhya, he landed in Hathras. While Swamiji was resting in the Hathras railway station, the young station master was attracted by the radiant face of this young sannyasi and approached him, offering some food and later accommodating him in his quarter. This young station master was Sarat Chandra Gupta, who in few days was accepted as Swamiji's disciple. He readily gave up his job and all his material belongings to serve Swamiji's cause, and later came to be known as Swami Sadananda. Accompanied by Sarat Chandra, Swamiji left for Saharanpur from there by train. From Saharanpur, they moved towards Haridwar, and from Haridwar, they walked towards Rishikesh. He got engrossed in deep meditation and prayers over there with his disciple. Swamiji was particularly very happy on finding an atmosphere suitable for his sadhana. The burbling sound of the Ganges and the panoramic and soothing view of the Himalayas was enough to enchant him. It was as if they were welcoming him with open arms. Swamiji wanted to spend some more time in Rishikesh performing his sadhana and further make a pilgrimage to both Kedarnath and Badrinath. But unfortunately, he had to drop the plan as Sarat Chandra got sick in the meantime. Swamiji had to rush back to Hathras, where he arranged for Sarat Chandra's treatment with the help of some old friends. And from there, he returned back to Boranagar Moth by the end of 1888. Early in 1890, Vivekananda started out again for North India, stopping at Ghazipur to see Pahari Baba. From Ghazipur, he wrote to Swami Akhandananda, requesting him to come down to the plains immediately, so that the two might make preparation to depart for Nepal, Tibet, and possibly China. But destiny had some other plans. The illness of a brother monk forced him to move to Banaras, where he heard the news of the death of Balaram Bose, the great disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Finally, he had to turn back to Calcutta. Later, on July 6th, he wrote to two of his brothers, Saradananda and Vaikunthanath, already in Almora.
I intend shortly, as soon as I can get a portion of my fare, to go to Almora, and then some places in Gharwa, on the Ganges, where I can settle down for a long meditation. Gangadhar is accompanying me. This time, I shall not go to Pahari Baba or any other saint. They divert one from one's highest purpose.
Before leaving, he told his Guru Bhais,
I shall not return until I acquire such realization that my very touch will transform a man.
When he left Kolkata in 1890, aiming for Almora via Nainital, an incident occurred in a place called Kakri Ghat, where Swamiji had a great spiritual experience that changed the course of his life. Though we hear stories about Swamiji's tendency of meditation a lot, but what happened here in Kakri Ghat on the banks of river Kosi near the Bhairav temple was about to change Swamiji's perspective about everything. Here, while meditating under the peepal tree, Swami Vivekananda realized the macrocosm and microcosm exists in the same plane. He realized what Vedas say, Yat Pinde Tat Brahmande. Later, mentioning about this incident to Swami Akhandananda, Swamiji wrote,
Oh Gangadhar, I just passed through one of the greatest moments of my life. Here under the peepal tree, one of the greatest problems of my life has been resolved. I have found the oneness of the macrocosm and the microcosm. In the microcosm of the body, everything that is there in macrocosm exists. I have seen the whole universe within an atom.
Later, he presented papers and lectures in London and America based on his experience at Kakri Ghat and named the series of lecture Macrocosm and Microcosm. While proceeding from Kakri Ghat towards Almora by foot, Swamiji fainted of exhaustion in a place called Karbala, which is 2 kilometers away from Almora. Gangadhar Maharaj went around in search of water when a Muslim fakir saw Swamiji fainted on a rock near the Muslim cemetery. Seeing this young sannyasi in that condition, the fakir brought some kakri and kept it beside Swamiji as an offering. Swamiji was so much exhausted that he couldn't even pick the kakri. Thus, he requested the fakir to feed him those kakri, to which the fakir hesitated by saying, But Swami, you are a Hindu monk and I am a Muslim. How can I feed you with my own hands?
To this, Swamiji replied,
Are we not brothers?
and thus the fakir fed those kakri to Swamiji and saved his life.
Later, when Swami Vivekananda returns from Chicago in 1897, he was already known all over the nation. He was also given a red carpet welcome by Lala Badri Shah, who had laid it for him from Lodhia to Almora. In this ceremony, he notices the Muslim fakir named Zulfikar Ali standing at a distance. This made him run towards him and bring him in front of all the people gathered. He introduced Zulfikar to everyone as the person because of whom he was alive, a person without whose help he couldn't have been the Vivekananda that he was. On reaching Almora, the two brother monks visited Lala Badri Shah. Swami Akhandananda had already known Lalaji from his past visits to Almora. Now impressed by Vivekananda on this very first visit, Lala Badri Shah had allowed him to stay in his house without any rent. That too while Vivekananda and his disciples were nothing but strangers to him. The room on the first floor where Vivekananda used to stay is maintained and looked after even today as a temple by the family. Some of his belongings, such as his footwear, table lamp, books, writings, clothes, and others, are still there. Vivekananda once asked Lala Badri Shah to suggest a hill where he could meditate in isolation and experience God, somewhere away from all disturbances. Lala Badri Shah suggested a place almost 8 to 10 kilometers away, where one may find many small caves near the Kasar Devi temple situated there. Swami Vivekananda, as suggested, visited the place. After 2 or 3 days, he started having a strange feeling as if someone was calling him from outside. After this happened multiple times, he decided to come out of the cave. On coming out, he was informed by the villagers that a postman had come with a telegram from Kolkata. But on failing to deliver it to Swamiji, he had taken it back to Lala Badri Shah. That telegram had brought the news of the suicide of his sister, Yogindra Bala, whom Swamiji loved a lot. This news of suicide left him very much perplexed. In a letter to Sister Nivedita, Swami Vivekananda writes that it was at this very moment in Kasar Devi that he took the resolution of never again thinking that the nation demands a life of austerity and penance in caves away from people. If something truly needed to be done, it was to educate the women of our nation. On the 4th of September, Swamiji, along with Swami Saradananda, Swami Akhandananda, and Swami Kripananda, left for Badrinath from Almora. On reaching Karnaprayag, they came to know that due to severe outbreak of famine in that area, the government has closed the way to Kedarnath and Badrikashram for the pilgrims. As a result, they had to stay in Karnaprayag for 3 days. Later, seeing no hope of Kedarnath being opened for pilgrims, they went to Rudraprayag. The natural beauty of Rudraprayag was indescribable. All around was a realm of desolation and deep stillness. Only the sounds of streams and waterfalls, along with the chirping of birds, could be heard. Swamiji's dream, cherished from childhood and youth, began to come true after seeing the unique beauty of the Himalayas, the abode of eternal snow shining like silver. His mind seemed to be in tune with nature. Every now and then, the sound of the river used to introduce various ragas and raginis to his ears, and he used to tell his Guru Bhais about them. From Rudraprayag, they moved to Srinagar in Garhwal. In Srinagar, they took shelter in a cottage on the banks of the Alaknanda. There, he came to know that Swami Turiyananda used to do penance in the very same cottage earlier. During this journey, Swamiji mostly used to discuss the philosophy of Upanishads with his Guru Bhais. Akhandanandaji writes, "After this, we went to Srinagar and stayed there for a month or a half. We used to read Upanishads from Swamiji on the way. Sadhan Bhajan continued in Srinagar. Swamiji was anxious to go towards Bhagirathi. We all walked towards Tehri on foot. On reaching Tehri, they found a shelter on the bank of Bhagirathi. They stayed there for 15 to 20 days, and most of their time was spent in meditation and singing devotional songs. Swami Akhandananda, however, fell sick in few days due to regular bath in the icy cold water of the Bhagirathi. A doctor over there, after examining Swami Akhandananda, advised the group to go to Dehradun. On hearing this from the doctor, Swamiji gave up his resolve to do penance in Badrikashram or any other place in the Himalayas, and decided to go straight to Dehradun with Akhandananda. All the 4 Guru Bhais left Tehri and proceeded via Mussoorie. When they were passing through Rajpur, they saw a monk from a distance and felt that it might be their most beloved Guru Bhai, Hari Maharaj. This made them start shouting, Hari Bhai, Hari Bhai, in a loud voice. When they reached near, they saw that it really was Turiyanandaji. In those days, he was doing penance in Rajpur. All the 5 Guru Bhais were overjoyed to meet him like this all of a sudden after so long. After getting to know each other's well-being, they started narrating their respective travel experiences. On the other hand, on reaching Dehradun, Swami Akhandananda was taken to the civil surgeon there, who advised him to stay in the plains until he recovered fully. After staying in Dehradun for 3 weeks, Swamiji, along with Swami Saradananda and Swami Turiyananda, went to Rishikesh. According to the old Bengali biography, Swamiji reached Rishikesh with his 2 Guru Bhais and stayed in the hermitage of Swami Dhanrajgiri, a famous saint there. The hut where Swamiji and his Guru Bhai stayed was located near the Chandreshwar Mahadev temple. Swamiji was overjoyed to find a favorable environment for meditation. There, Swamiji, during his meditation in the small cave in Chandreshwar Mahadev temple, realized that the water of river Chandrabhaga, when it gets flooded, does not recede until it touches the Shivalinga there. Here, we can also find his name inscribed along with other sannyasis in Kailash Ashrama, where he once stayed too. It's said that he had numerous lively and eye-opening discussions with the contemporary sannyasis. From Rishikesh, he came down to Kankhal in Haridwar, where he met Swami Brahmananda, who was doing penance there. From there, he travelled to Meerut and further to Delhi, and hence began a new journey. It can be rightly said it was Uttarakhand itself from where his journey throughout the nation began, and that was the year 1890. For the next 2.5 years, he wandered on through the length and breadth of the country, now and then encountering some Guru Bhais by chance. Then, all of a sudden, he completely disappeared. Somehow, in Madras, he came to know of a forthcoming Parliament of Religion to be held at Chicago in 1893. Consequently, some young men of Madras raised the money to pay for his passage to the United States. Only the Holy Mother, Sarada Devi, was actually told of his new plan, and she gave him her blessings. When he was next heard of, he had already become the famous Swami Vivekananda, who had taken the Parliament of Religion by storm. Swamiji returned from America and Europe in January 1897. With him came J.J. Goodwin, an English disciple and an expert court stenographer, whom he first met in New York. He had volunteered to work for him without any charges in order to document all his lectures. It's important to know this because whatever we know, study, and appreciate about Vivekananda today, most of it has been the contribution of Goodwin. The strenuous work of lecturing and holding classes abroad, undertaken with the combined hope of raising funds for starving India and spreading the message of Vedanta in the West, had its effect on his health. The tumultuous welcome he received on his homecoming after landing in Ceylon and in Calcutta, the vast crowds, the processions, the public addresses, the innumerable interviews added to his exhaustion. He wanted to fly to Almora in order to rest, but he felt that two major tasks awaited him in Bengal. The first was to organize the Ramakrishna Mission for service to the poor, the downtrodden, and the needy among his countrymen. And the second was to plan a voluntary relief work by the monks in the famine-stricken places of Bengal. His fiery command to his brother monks and disciples was to forget their own salvation for the sake of others. Finally, in early May 1897, on the doctor's insistence, he left Calcutta for Almora. Some of his Guru Bhais and disciples went with him too. Goodwin and another English follower, Miss Muller, had already preceded him. This time, Goodwin and the other admirers went all the way down to Kathgodam to receive him. As the party was approaching the town by the old bridle path, they met on the way by a large crowd, and Vivekananda was made to mount a gaily decorated horse. The triumphant procession proceeded to the bazaar, where 3,000 people were waiting to give him a public welcome. All along the way, women gathered on the rooftops showered him with flowers and auspicious rice. Decorative awnings were strung across the street in front of Badri Shah's house to form a pandal, and all the houses were lighted up as if for a festival. 2 addresses in English and 1 in Sanskrit were read out, and to this, in view of the lateness of the hour, Vivekananda made a brief but moving reply in English. He referred to the Himalayas as the land of their forefathers' dreams.
The Holy Land, where every ardent soul in India wants to come at the end of his life, to close the last chapter of his mortal career here. This is the land which since my very boyhood I have been dreaming of. I have attempted again and again to live here forever, and although the time was not right, and I had work to do and was whirled away outside of this holy place, yet I sincerely pray and hope and almost believe my last days will be here, of all places on earth. These Himalayas stand for renunciation, and as our forefathers used to be attracted to it in the later days of their life, so strong souls from all quarters of this earth in time to come will be attracted to this father of mountains, when all this fight between sects and all these differences in dogmas will not be remembered anymore, and quarrels between your religion and my religion will have vanished altogether. When mankind will understand that there is but one eternal religion, and that is the perception of the divine within, and the rest is mere froth, such ardent souls will come here, knowing that the world is but vanity of vanities, knowing that everything is useless except the worship of the Lord and the Lord alone. These mountains are associated with the best memories of our race. Here, therefore, must be one of those centers, not merely of activity, but more of calmness, of meditation, and of peace. And I hope someday to realize it.
This time, Vivekananda remained in Almora 2.5 months again, as the guest of his old friend Badri Shah. Yet, sometimes he felt that even Almora wasn't far enough, wasn't quite enough. Twice, he retreated to Devbhoomi, an estate some 20 miles to north, and stayed there for 47 days. There, he rode horseback and enjoyed the delightful climate and magnificent scenery, especially the sunrise over the mighty snow peaks. Documents say that Swamiji wrote a lot in his time over there, especially letters. In a letter to Swami Suddhananda from Devbhoomi, Swamiji wrote,
Lastly, you must remember, I expect more from my children than from my brethren. I want each one of my children to be 100 times greater than I could ever be. Every one of you must be a giant. Must. That is my word. Obedience, readiness, and love for the cause. If you have these three, nothing can hold you back.
Gradually, his health improved, and he wrote to his doctor in Calcutta that he had not felt so well since he was a boy. Miss Muller, who undertook to feed him 3 square meals a day, European style, undoubtedly helped to hasten his recovery, but he would not give himself a rest any longer than was absolutely necessary. By the end of July, he was ready to leave Almora. Before he left, he gave 2 lectures at the Almora Inter College. Here, in response to the public request, he attempted his first talk in Hindi, his subject being Vedic teaching in theory and practice. His 4th visit to Uttarakhand and the 3rd one to Almora happened in 1898. By this time, more of his foreign disciples had followed him to India. Miss Margaret Noble arrived at Calcutta from England in January 1898, and Mrs. Polly Bull and Miss Josephine MacLeod from America in February. Captain and Mrs. Xavier, as the heat of the plains increased, left for Almora, where they rented a large house, then known as Thompson House, and belonging to Badri Shah at the western end of the ridge. They were still concerned with the question of finding a suitable location for the proposed Advaita Ashrama. Vivekananda was urged to come and stay with them as their guest. Fearing that his newly arrived Westerners would fall ill during the burning heat of the advancing summer, Vivekananda took them all with him and left Calcutta for Almora in May 11th, 1898. The party included Miss Margaret Noble, Mrs. Polly Bull, Miss MacLeod, Mrs. Patterson, 2 of his brother monks, Swami Niranjanananda and Turiyananda, and 2 of his personal disciples, Sadananda and Swarupananda. Vivekananda and the monks became the guests of Captain and Mrs. Xavier at Thompson House, while the Western friends and Mrs. Noble lived at Oakley House. In this Oakley House, now known as the Nivedita Cottage, under the Deodar tree, Miss Margaret Elizabeth Noble was blessed by Swamiji and was given the name Nivedita, the dedicated one. Vivekananda set himself the task of training these Western followers, of breaking down their instinctive prejudices, of explaining strange Indian customs, myths, symbols, and history. Every morning, after an early walk with the monks, he went on to Oakley House for breakfast and spent several hours in vivid talks ranging over an infinite variety of subjects. Sister Nivedita has left an inspiring account of these discussions and interviews with many who came to see him. One day, Mrs. Annie Besant, the then leader of the Theosophical movement in India, was entertained at tea at Thompson House. Now and then he was again overwhelmed by the old mood to be utterly alone. On one such occasion, he departed for Shahi Devi, a forested peak some miles west of Almora. Here he remained for 3 days. Back in Almora, however, a new shock awaited him. A wire brought news of the death of the faithful Goodwin at Ooty in South India. When the telegram announcing Goodwin's death was handed to him, he stood in front of Thompson House, according to Miss MacLeod, gazing off to the distant snow peaks in absolute silence for a long time. Then he remarked very quietly, "The days of my public utterance are over." That night he composed a poem, Requiescat in Peace, which he sent to Goodwin's mother, and in feeling words he paid tribute to his friend and disciple. "The debt of gratitude I owe him can never be repaid, and those who think they have been helped by any thought of mine ought to know that almost every word of it was published through the untiring and most unselfish exertions of Mr. Goodwin." Once more, the time had come to move, and Vivekananda decided to proceed to Kashmir with his Western disciples. Before he left Almora for the last time, he took an important step on June 11, 1898, and that was resuming of the Prabuddha Bharat. The publication of Prabuddha Bharat had originally started in 1896 from Madras, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, it had to experience a hiatus for some time. Before leaving Almora, it was with the assistance of Savior couples that Swami Vivekananda undertook the task of resuming the publication of the magazine. A printing press was brought by the Saviors from London to the Thompson House. The young disciple, Swami Swarupananda, became its new editor. This was where the work of printing commenced once again, publishing its first issue in August 1898, continuing till death. Swamiji himself would monitor the articles to be published in the magazine. Prabuddha Bharat today lives to its name. In 1896, it was in the Alps that Swami Vivekananda, while traveling with Captain Sevier and Mrs. Sevier, expressed his desire to have a similar retreat for the monks in the Himalayas. In December 1896, the couple moved to India with an objective to find a place near Almora and set up an ashram. There, in Almora, they rented a bungalow, and this became the residence of Swami Vivekananda and the Saviors for the next 2 years. In 1897, when Swamiji left for Kashmir from Almora, the Savior couple, along with Swami Swarupananda, a monastic disciple of Vivekananda, started traveling to the interior area looking for a suitable place, which was eventually found in July 1898. set amidst dense deodar, pine and oak forests. A land which was until then a tea estate was promptly purchased and decided upon for the new ashram in Mayavati. Finally, with the help of Swami Swarupananda, the ashram was set up, along with a small dwelling for the monks on 19th March 1899. Advaita Ashram of Mayavati is the most unique among all the centers of Ramakrishna Mission all over the world. Its very name sings of its speciality, Advaita. Advaita is where the polarity between the Atman and the Paramatman ends. Swamiji travelled to Mayavati Ashram in 1901. This time he took the route that passes through Dhari, Paharpani, Mornola and Dhunaghat to reach Advaita Ashram, Mayavati of Lohaghat. During this visit to Mayavati Ashram in 1901, it was heavily snowing. There was nothing to eat when he reached the PWD guest house at Mornola. Even the caretaker expressed his thought, claiming Swamiji would not be able to stay there in such condition. Later, Swamiji, with the assistance of that very caretaker, arranged for firewood and cooked khichdi. It was the day of New Year, and this khichdi was savoured by everyone present there. Swamiji reached the Mayavati ashram on 3rd January 1901 and stayed there till 18th January. During this time, he enjoyed the quietness and stillness of the place and wrote a few articles to be published in Prabuddha Bharat. And this became his last visit to Uttarakhand. Swamiji's visit to Uttarakhand in the 5 years 1888, 1890, 1897, 1898 and 1901 can be considered as something much more than just mere journeys. There are plethora of saints living in the Himalayas who may have undertaken journey to the Kanyakumari like Swamiji and still do, but Swami Vivekananda stands apart from all of them. However, the way he experienced Himalayas, walking over them, by comprehending its secrets and by giving a place to it deep within his heart, is a matter of great pride for us. It in itself is a heritage of our land. Uttarakhand, the place that attracted Swami Vivekananda to visit its Shakti Punj so many times, owing to its sense of peace, beauty and spirituality. It is the land, the aura of which was deeply felt by Vivekananda, and consequently given an expansion by its union with its contemplations. The voice of Swami Vivekananda can be heard even today in the depths of the silence of Uttarakhand's rivers, forests and mountains. One just needs to listen attentively.
विश्ववन्दितो विश्वहितैषी विश्ववन्दितो विश्वहितैषी विश्वोद्धारमनीषी जयतु